All right. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. My name is Jeremy Watson. I'm the CEO of Bedrock Investment Property. Over the last 15 years, me and my team have bought about 5,000 single-family residentials, probably coming up on 6,000 right now. We run a portfolio of hundreds and hundreds of properties a month. And tonight we're just going to talk a lot about what makes a good rental property in today's market, where we're finding good rental properties in today's market, and we're going to talk about repositioning from bad properties into good properties and how to do that without driving yourself crazy. Feel free to throw up in chat where you're joining us from and let us know, hey, do you already own rental properties or are you looking to get into rental properties? We've done about as much as anyone you'll ever meet, and so we'll answer any questions that come up at the end of the webinar. We try to stay on as long as it takes to kind of give everyone as many good answers as they need. Let's go ahead and light this candle, rock and roll. Feel free to drop any questions in chat and we'll try to address them when it makes sense. All right, so my name is Jeremy Watson. I'm 43 years old. I have investors who tell me they have purses older than me, but I have been investing in real estate since I was in high school. It's always been my passion. I've read thousands of books on the subject. I've never really done anything that wasn't that, except I took a decade that I spent in financial advice out of college. Now, in that decade spent in financial advice, I was advising consistently on over $300 million. Now, most of my clients were worth between $3 million and $10 million in that region. And I saw the same thing for 10 straight years. And I had the same conversation for 10 straight years. And it was that many of my clients who should not have ever had another financial worry in life, between $3 to $10 million net worth, were what I call rich on paper, but poor in person. They just had a stack of problems that they were trying to figure out financially, and it just didn't make any sense. As a younger guy, I didn't understand how you could have a net worth of $10 million dollars and just be that worried about money constantly. But they were. They were worried about long-term care. They were worried about medical bills. They were worried about chronic care. They were about helping their kids and their grandkids go to college. They were stressed with net worths of 2, 3, 5, 6, 10 million. As we looked at portfolio after portfolio for a decade, what I realized is most of the portfolios looked something like this, right? Out of an $8 million typical Northern California portfolio, and that's where a lot of my clients were in the Bay Area, they would have about $5 million in real estate, and then they would have like $1.6 million in bonds, right? A little bit in their retirement accounts, maybe $1 million in their retirement account, maybe $2 million in their retirement account, have some cash and then some other stuff. The great majority of all the wealth I have ever seen, bar none, game, set, match, has been in real estate. Almost every millionaire I've ever met in my life was made in real estate. Almost 250 million of the $300 million portfolio I advised on for a decade was in real estate. And what we realized is that all of these people who had real estate had very similar problems with that real estate. It was such a problem that I eventually left my glorious financial advice career and I started a company specifically to help with this set of problems. That's what Bedrock does. We help people with their investment properties. We've done it a lot. We really enjoy it. Now, don't worry if you have no investment properties at all. Don't worry about if this is your first call ever thinking of getting a rental. The solution that Bedrock developed actually works for both. If you have a big portfolio, we can help you optimize it. If you don't have a portfolio, we can help you build a portfolio. The truth is, it's just going to be buying another rental for us. And we've bought about 5,000 of those. Now, the reason my clients were so stressed, rich on paper, poor in person, is because their real estate was not carrying its weight. Okay? The real estate, especially in highly appreciated markets, and I'm talking Northern California, Southern California, Portland, Seattle, New York, any place that you think, hey, the real estate there is really expensive, was some of the hottest trash, cash flowing real estate I have ever seen in my whole freaking life. And it took me a couple of years to get a client to really admit what was happening. I was like, I was friends with a guy and I was like, okay, you got to tell me what's going on here. You've got $4 million in real estate, but every conversation we have, you're just like, I'm living on rice and beans. And I could not understand. I could not square his balance sheet with the universe he was living in. And then he introduced me to a little concept that from then forward I have called lazy real estate. Now, lazy real estate does absolutely jack nothing for anyone who owns a piece of lazy real estate. And if you own a piece of lazy real estate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It doesn't really pay its own bills. It might kind of pay its own bills, but it is pretty trash, right? Lazy real estate, you've got to take into account when you go on vacation because someone's got to deal with it when you're gone. You're always thinking about it. You're never really free of lazy real estate. Sitting with every financial conversation you ever have, if you're talking to your kids about going to college, or your grandkids about going to college. Lazy real estate just sits there in the corner the whole time and is kind of useless. Lazy real estate especially shows up if you're ever going to the doctor or talking about long-term care or chronic care. Lazy real estate is just your life's companion as you try to summit the summits of life and you try to accomplish something that's worth accomplishing. Lazy real estate just gets dragged along with you the whole time. Again, I saw 10 years of this. I talked to people who had real estate for 30, 40, 50 years, and lazy real estate is a real problem. It is enough of a problem that I left a career and started a company that just had to do with just this. Because real estate should act very differently than this. Real estate should be big, strong, paying the bills. Real estate should be taking you where you're trying to go. It should be actively building the portfolio. It should be going up in value. It should make your life a lot easier, no harder at all. And so what we do is we help people find really good real estate. Now, that comes down to what I would say is the number one rule of real estate investing. I believe that the golden rule, the gold standard of real estate investing, based on every operator I have ever met, and I know people who have built $100 million portfolios, the gold standard of real estate investing has and always will be the 1% rule. All right? Basically, the 1% rule is very straightforward. You should be getting 1% of the value of your property every single month as rent. It's very straightforward. If you have a $2 million property, you should be getting $20,000 a month in rent, right? The higher that number gets, better. If I can get 2% of my value per month, great. It's when I start getting lower than that 1%, like a half a percent or 0.25% or 0.73%. When I get under 1%, it all just goes to garbage so fast. Okay. The 1% rule is the gold standard. Okay. It works on big properties. It works on little properties. And the reason for that is the way that the math breaks down. Everything's mostly proportional. Homeowners insurance, mostly proportional. Property taxes, mostly proportional. HOAs, mostly proportional. About everything cascades off of that 1%. But if we start off way off the 1% rule, the math is never, ever going to work. The truth is, every major operator of real estate that I know, every single operator of real estate I've ever met, all agrees with this. It's the gold standard. We joke in the firm that the 1% rule is ancient. Adam and Eve used the 1% rule on their first rental property. All right. It is just a tried and true standard. And if we don't get too far away from that, it's really easy to do well in real estate. Now, the 1% rule, the problem with it is as soon as we get off 1% and it turns into a 0.83 or a 0.81, it just gets real messy as soon as you come off 1%. And a lot of times in a market, you'll know the value or you'll know the rent. And you have to kind of work backwards to figure out. And each market's a little bit different. So we like to boil all of the numbers down on our highest level of the hopper to see if it's a deal worth doing to something we call a gross rent multiplier. It's the same thing as a 1% rule. It's just backwards. We say you take the property value. Let me see if I can write on this screen. We take the property value. You divide it by the rent, and that's going to give you a single number. That is very, very important. If it meets the 1% rule, it's going to be 100. I will consider buying something up to 160 GRM. That is going to be the number that I say, hey, if it's over 160 GRM, it won't work, can't work, no way, no how. Truth is, different markets are slightly different. Florida, homeowners insurance is twice as much as Memphis for us. Florida, almost every property has an HOA. There are differences in markets that we have to take into effect. But if we start out under 160 GRM, we're gonna be able to find some properties that really work. The GRM is just the highest level of the hopper that we can look at and say, hey, is this even a deal worth considering? Feel free to throw up in the chat. What's your property worth? What's the rent you're getting? And do your own GRM calculations right now. It's easy. Property value divided by rent you're getting. What's my GRM? Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. If it's over 160, that's bad. All right, that's just bad. Anything over 160, the math just breaks. It just busts. And there's almost no way to recover. It is like trying, as the Big Short said, it's like trying to win the Indianapolis 500 riding a donkey. There's just no way to fix it if you start off over 160. Nothing works. The math is just broken. So I need that to be very clear. Over 160, bad, super bad, red blinking bad. All right. So with that being the case, I know what you guys are saying. You're saying, but there's nothing like that in my market. You might have done the math on one or two of your properties right now. You might be scratching them out and being like, well, I'm at 224 here and I'm at 315 here. Ooh, I'm at 800 over here. No, not 800. That's catastrophically bad. But 160 minus might seem very unachievable. I hear that and I know that. Here's just some of the properties that we've purchased recently. Now, we have helped clients buy over 5,000 houses. We started this business in 2007. My team has bought thousands of houses this way. And so we are absolutely seeing really good deals all across the country. John Cook says the price point in Memphis is about 175. We're renting for about 1,050. Okay. We buy properties in Memphis all day, every day. We are probably competing for similar properties if you're buying in Memphis. The truth is, it's one of my favorite markets. So here's one of the properties that we just bought. $240,000, rents for $2,100 a month. 1% would say it would rent for $2,400 a month. I honestly don't care. As long as it's under 160, it would be worth considering. 114, awesome deal. In today's market, with today's interest rates, I can cash flow positive a 114. I can make a client very happy with a 114. Here's another property we just bought, $300,000, $2,500 a month. 300 grand divided by $2,500 a month gives you a GRM of 120. I love a 120 GRM. I can get behind that all day, every day. Here's a property that we did not buy, that I would not buy. $2 million renting for $4,000 a month. Sure, it may be gorgeous. Sure, it may be everything you could ever want in a home to live in, but it is a bad rental property. A 500 GRM does not work. A 500 GRM will never work. All right, here's another example. We see this all the time in Northern California. Millbrae, San Mateo, Lower San Francisco, San Jose. $1.5 million, $2 million renting for between $4,000 and $5,500 a month. That is the standard of Northern California. That's what I saw all the time in Northern California. 300 GRM, busted. Won't work, never work. Now you might be saying, hey, Jeremy, I would love to have that house. I would love to have that house. I would love to have these houses that are these big, gorgeous assets, right? The truth is, you would love to have those houses because you think they're going to go up in value over time. It's an appreciation play. And what I'm trying to help everyone reframe their thinking around is we're not talking about appreciation in this call. We're talking about cash flow. Appreciation is a young man's game. You can plant that tree and you can wait for it to grow for 30 years. Cash flow is a retiree's game. And as someone who has looked at the balance sheets of thousands of people who are in retirement, they're not worried about their properties going up in value anymore. They need their properties to be paying medical bills. They need their properties to be helping with, going on a trip before their knees give out. They need to have their properties actually contributing to their lifestyle because they're realizing, hey, none of us are going to get out of here alive. We're all going to run out of time on this earth. We actually want to be able to enjoy some of this and then pass it behind. Here is an example of two properties. One is a 500 GRM on the right side. You see $2 million renting at $5,000 a month. As I said, the expense stacks on single family residential are very proportional. Okay? If you're getting that low a rent, I can almost guarantee it is cash flowing negative. If it's not cash flowing negative, it's because you're skimping out on CapEx or you're locked into, Prop 13 taxes in California. There's something going on with your proportions that just throw it off in some weird way. But I can almost guarantee if you got a $2 million property renting for $4,000, $5,000 a month, it is either break even or negative. That's no way to live in retirement. There's no way to live in retirement having a $2 million, $4 million, $6 million asset. The client that I finally got to answer this question, I was like, why? You just got to help me understand, like, how do you not have any money? And he was like, well, I have these 10 properties and none of them really pay me anything. And I said, really? 10 properties? You've got $20 million of property and you earn nothing on any of them? And he's like, well, you really know how to twist the knife, don't you? And I was like, no, I'm just trying to understand what's happening. You're saying you have $20 million in assets that are doing nothing for you? And that is a very common occurrence. It's very common. Northern California, Southern California, Seattle, Portland, New York, any place that you think the real estate is expensive, I guarantee that the same thing has happened. The values of the real estate have floated away into the stratosphere of expensive, right? And people who rent still have multiple jobs, right? The people who are buying in Northern California apparently all work for Google and all are now, you have a $600,000 signing bonus to go buy a house, right? But the people who are renting are in a different situation completely. And so it just doesn't work in highly appreciated markets. Those numbers break and they just never come back. They never start working again. With that being the case, 160, that's the number for the conversation. If you are over 160, flashing danger. If you're under 160, it might be a great asset. I have some conversations every once in a while, and I can tell from the chat that's going. Some of you are buying in markets that are actually quite good. Now, managing them might be a nightmare, but you're buying in markets that are quite good, and we'll just leave them alone. If they're happy, leave them alone, right? What I'm saying is most people who are in highly appreciated markets just need a window into the markets that work. You can't have a piece of garbage cash flow real estate in San Jose and say, the way I'm going to fix this is I'm going to sell my piece of garbage cash flow real estate in San Jose and I'm going to buy a piece of real estate that really, really works in San Mateo or in San Francisco. Real estate is regional. If your macros are broken, then nothing else is going to work from there. It's about finding a market where the numbers are really good. And there are markets in the US that are really good. Again, me and my team have helped people buy about 5,000 properties since 2007. We found some insane deals from 2007 to 2012. We've found good deals in the last month, but it's all about looking in the right place for those deals because there are markets that are really, really good that we really, really like. Now, if you've already heard enough and you're just like, hey, I understand what they're after, I want to have them look over my portfolio, we'll do some calculations, we'll look at what's performing what way, we'll do ROI calcs, we'll look at current values. No matter what happens after this call, you're going to want to end up on the call with me or one of my two best teammates who have a lot of experience buying houses and working with properties and managing properties, right? You're going to want to be on the phone with one of the three of us. You're just going to want to get on the phone with us because the truth is everyone's situation is different and no real estate advice fits for everyone. Now, let's look at some live examples so that you can see some real numbers I have actually just pulled up. Now, I pulled all this number from Zillow and Redfin and Trulia. I pulled a bunch of data for this call Monday of this week. So this is all brand new. This is just a Zillow search for every three bedroom, two bath house in that area that's between 12 and 2,400 square feet. It's my buy box, what I would actually consider buying, what I would want to own. All right. 77 Cleves Avenue is currently renting on the market for $5,500 a month. Now, the 1% rule would say I would want to buy that house for about $550,000. Let's just use that because the math is nice and round. I'd want to buy it for 550 grand. That's the gold standard. I can go a little more than that. 700,000 might still work, right? Let's use the 1% rule because the numbers are round. With that being the case, Redfin has it currently marked up somewhere between 1.2 and 1.45 million. All right? That is never going to work. That is just flat never going to work. 1.257 million on something I can only rent for 5,500 bucks. That's a GRM of 227. The whole market's like that. Let's look at another example. Millbrae. Okay, Millbrae is just a little north of San Mateo. All right? 5,990 bucks a month on the market right now as we speak. Someone is trying to rent that thing. All right, 231 Marcella, Millbrae. If I was buying it for 100 GRM or the 1% rule, I'd look to spend about $599,000. All right, with that being the case, currently Redfin has it marked up at about 2.7 million. I saw this all the time. That is the laziest piece of real estate on the planet. All right. There's no way that that thing is what people thought it was when they bought it. 2.7 million divided by 5,990 bucks. That Millbrae house is 455 GRM. Now, the reason that never works, and I'm going to be honest, that is not going to work. That is never going to work, no matter how you do the math. You can throw all your other assets at that. You can have this piece of lazy real estate in your world for the rest of existence. It is never going to work because the thing I love the most about GRM is that what it actually represents is how much am I paying for every $1 of rent that I'm buying per month? $455 of GRM in this case says, hey, I'm spending $455 per every $1 that I'm getting in rent per month here going forwards. If I have no expenses, and if you've ever had rental real estate, that's not the case. But if I ever have expenses, I'm going to have 455 months of rent before I even break even. If I had a zero expense stack, which is not realistic, 455 months is over 37 years. That is an actual property that I actually pulled up on the market Monday of this week. $5,900 a month of rent, $2.7 million market valuation. Now that is madness. Never going to work no matter how you slice it. Now, the justification that I heard all the time, and if you have any of these lazy pieces of real estate, you're going to make two justifications, and we're going to talk about them both. The justification I heard all the time is, but I bought it for $80,000 back in 1973. I bought it for 80 grand and it's renting for $5,900 a month. That's a great return, right? Because I only bought it for $80,000. Unfortunately, that's one of the classic logical fallacies. You're using the wrong yardstick here. All right. The opportunity cost yardstick is a thing. When we're going to do the math on this, we've got to say, hey, my current asset value is 2.72 million. My current rent is 5,990 bucks. If I could just take that 2.7 million and drop it into a CD at a bank, I would earn 3, 4, or 5 times what I'm currently earning in rent. And here's the hard question that I finally was able to get to with my clients over a decade. I said, honest question. If you could rebuy that real estate today for 2.7 million, would you? If you could buy it for 2.7 million, knowing you could only rent it for 5,000, would you? And the answer over and over was absolutely not. I would never pay the prices that people are paying today. So the question is, why would you keep making that same decision? Why would you keep that amount of your assets tied up in that type of asset? You would never buy this in a million years for a valuation of 2.7 million. You would never spend 2.7 million to get $5,900 of rent. So why are you making that decision every single day? It really comes down to they're dancing with the devil they know, and the step up in basis is keeping them trapped, which we're about to talk about. Now, this is not something unproven. We have done a lot of this. We have bought now in 13 major markets. At this moment, I manage 13 property managers in 9 major U.S. markets. I saw someone earlier mention Memphis. I love Memphis. We're buying in Memphis constantly. We're also buying in Indianapolis, Ocala, Florida, Charlotte, North Carolina, and one or two more I can't think off the top of my head. Jonesboro, Arkansas. All right, we're buying in all of those markets, and here are active Zillow listings to show you the same exact thing I just showed you, that California has some real hot trash when it comes to highly appreciated lazy real estate. Here's Cordova, Tennessee. Now, Memphis is great. I love Memphis. This house is for rent right now, as of Monday, $2,500 a month. At 100 GRM, I would hope to buy that house for about $250,000. Okay? I can buy that house, $2,500 a month, for about 270. Okay, it just closed December 12th, 2025. Someone just bought that house. Now, it wasn't me, some other lucky guy got that house. But the truth is, I would hope to buy it for about 250. It just sold for 270. There are markets where the numbers are really good. 270 grand divided by $2,500 a month, that's a 108 GRM. That's right on the 1% rule. There are markets where it works. Memphis, Tennessee, awesome market. We really love Memphis. Now, there's other markets we like too. Here's a property that I found for you guys. Jonesboro, Arkansas. 1,700 bucks a month. I'd want to buy it for about 175, maybe 2. It just sold August 8th, 2025 for 205 grand. 117 GRM, I would buy that all day, every day. That looks like a three bedroom, two bath, brick exterior house built after 1980. That looks like it could be a gold mine. Truth is, you just got to know where to look, and then you got to know how to do all the diligence past figuring out where to look. But the first thing is we got to know where to look. Another house in Jonesboro, $1,400 a month. Estimated value is $183,000. 131 GRM. I would at least consider it because the truth is, the big numbers, the macro numbers, are what define what markets we should be buying in. All right? The macro legislation are what determines the markets we should not be buying in. I would not right now buy a piece of rental property in New York or California because the legislation is so punitive for landlords and it is so difficult to be a landlord in those markets if you ever want to earn a penny. All right? There are markets where the legislation is just better. Jonesboro, Arkansas, we love that market. We're buying all day between about 1,400 to 1,750 in rent. We're buying all day at about 180 to $205,000. We're working with some builders in Jonesboro, Arkansas. I just had some stuff come across my desk. $199,000 renting for $1,850 a month. Brand new builds, builder warranties. We have some really good relationships in these markets, and they constantly feed us good deals because we end up on webinars with people like you, and they want to find good deals. And that's our whole business. We just keep good deals and we keep inside of our buy box. Salisbury, North Carolina, a little sleeper suburb north of Charlotte. All right. We love Salisbury, North Carolina. We bought 15 houses in Salisbury just 3 or 4 years ago that we're selling now. But here's an example. 2,275 bucks. Currently, the valuation on that is $274,000. GRM 121. Beautiful house. 4 bedroom, two bath, brick exterior, right? Here's a house that we actually bought 15 of these. All right. We bought 15 of these houses from the builder when these were constructed. All right. 2,350 bucks a month of rent for $346,000. Now you might say to yourself, well, Jeremy, these numbers are creeping up. These numbers are creeping up on you, and you'd be right. The truth is there's a twist on this one. We bought 15 of those. We're selling these now. We actually bought these for $1,850 in rent, and we bought them for $199,000 a piece. Our clients are now selling out of them at $346,000 a piece. So that's why we bought 15 of those, 105 GRMs. We're always looking for where the markets are good. And unlike other people, I'm not tied to a market. All right. I buy in Charlotte, North Carolina because the numbers are still good there. I buy in Ocala because the numbers are still good there. We used to buy in Phoenix before the numbers went insane. We used to buy in Nevada before the numbers went insane. We used to buy in Orlando before the numbers went insane. The beautiful thing about Bedrock is we are constantly looking for where the market is moving. So we have clients who have bought properties with us in Memphis, 3 or 4 properties, and then they buy 4 or 5 properties in Indianapolis, and they buy 5 properties in Orlando, and then they sell the ones in Orlando, and after 5 to 6 years, and they move those into Charlotte, right? By working with Bedrock, you've just constantly got us vetting properties all day, every day. Again, we're going to keep it sub 160. Now, back to the Millbrae, California house, because it's a house that I have seen so many times I can see it in my dreams. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. If you don't have this answer already in your head, why would a retiree hold on to a lazy property? Maybe you're on this call and you're like, I don't understand why this thing would happen. I don't understand why anyone would be in the situation that Jeremy is describing. Can anyone guess why someone would hold on to a piece of trash property that is just negative, cash flow, mediocre? Can anyone guess why this situation occurs so often? Capital gains. The reason they're in this is because they're waiting for a step up in basis. They're waiting for death. Okay? That's the only reason any of these people had any of this property. They were just sitting there and waiting for death because they know if they sell the property before they die, they're going to get capital gains murdered. And I mean murdered because every financial advisor in the world, you're right, 1031 exchanges are really good. Jonathan, we're going to talk all about that. Every financial advisor in the world who's ever talked about real estate, it's like, hey, you buy, you hold it until you die, and then your kids inherit it capital gains tax free. You buy $200,000 house, it's worth $500,000 when you die. Your kids step up in basis, and it's worth $500,000, right? Beautiful plan. Unless the property's hot trash, has no cash flow, and kind of defines your whole retirement around eating rice and beans. Unless that, beautiful plan, right? If you sell now, here's what is going to happen with the asset. All right, you're going to pay federal cap gains tax at 20% because it's a $2 million asset. It's going to take your taxable income for one single year through the roof like an insulin spike. You're going to pay the max capital gain rate 20%. You're going to pay state taxes, let's say California, just because I've done so much stinking business in California. You're going to pay 14.4%. You're going to pay a transactional fee from the Obamacare tax of 3.8%. And the new transactional tax in California on real estate is 0.5%. So you're going to end up whopping 61% left. If you want me to break that out and actually show you how the math is going to play out, you're going to pay 400 grand on a $2 million cap gain. You're going to pay $288,000 on a California state income tax. You're going to pay $76,000 on Obamacare, and then you're going to pay $100,000 real estate transactional tax, something like that. All right, it is easily going to be $700 to $800,000 in taxes, and you're only going to leave behind $1,000,001, something like that. Right? Your mileage may vary. Truth of the matter is, you may be in a lower cap gain, yeah, lower income tax state. You may not have a transactional tax. With that being the case, you may have slightly different numbers, but the basics are there for everyone. That's the reason people hold on to these properties. Because if you just wait till death, the property is going to step up in basis. The new basis is going to be exactly what it is at time of inheritance. You're going to get an appraisal on that property within 90 days. You're going to be able to sell it tax free, and your kids are going to be millionaires. You just have the unfortunate problem of living with a lazy piece of real estate for your entire life, right? Maybe you have enough assets. Here's the four problems nobody talks about, except for me, for a decade. These are the four problems that nobody talks about and no one admits. There's four huge problems that people just don't admit when it comes to step up in basis. Number one, you might not get to death without having to sell this house. Long-term care is the number one thing that can break and scramble that nest egg. Long-term care expenses is the number one concern that people had that I worked with, and they're like, hey, I'm hoping that I can kind of bend my whole financial life around this piece of lazy real estate so that I don't have to sell it so that my kids can be rich. This thing that I bought as a retirement asset has turned into like a legacy asset, right? It's only there for my kids. It's only there to make them millionaires, which I have problems with in my own right. But the truth is, it was never meant to be a legacy asset. It was supposed to be paying bills in retirement. If the day comes when you have long-term care costs that are more than you can afford with your other assets, you're going to have to sell that thing and you're going to get tax murdered. Number two, inflation, which people have just started seeing really creep up. I served a Venezuelan mission. I'm LDS. I lived in Venezuela from 2001 to 2003. I have lived inflation for 2 solid years in a hyperinflation country. And people are just starting to wake up and realizing, oh, inflation's it's spicy, right? So inflation can kick the ever-loving crap out of your whole plan. Now, if inflation ticks up more and your expenses tick up more, maybe you're not going to get to death with that property. Maybe you're going to be forced to sell that property at some point. If it is one $2 million asset or $1.5 million asset, we get, again, tax capital gains murdered. All right. You have a single year windfall tax event. It is the worst thing you can ever have when it comes to taxation. And number three, no cash flow. All right. We've talked about that already. The lack of cash flow, like how are you living on rice and beans worth $8 million? I don't possibly know because there's no company out there like Bedrock. Luckily for you, luckily for me, I have fixed that. Bedrock exists. We're going to talk all about how we do it. And the last risk that no one talks about is what I call the inheritance bomb. Most people who have real estate have three types of kids. All right. They have the one who's got a really good job with Google. They've got their head on straight. They're an engineer or whatever. They're doing great. They don't need the money. All right. You're going to drop a $2 million piece of property on these people. It's going to step up in basis. Then they have someone who's really responsible and they're going to end up dealing with the actual house. The guy working for Google doesn't have time to deal with this rental house that they just inherited that's worth $2 million. And then they've got a kid who's horrible with money, who's the worst with money. And he is up to his eyebrows because he spends all his time sports betting or whatever the crap, right? You've all met these people. I have had hundreds of clients, and they all have kind of flavors of these kids. One who's very responsible, one who's very well off, and one who's really, 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 really not. Dropping one $2 million property in the middle of these three kids is just a bomb. They're going to fight over this property for the rest of their lives. And the reason for that is the one who's really well off doesn't need the money. He really doesn't care. But he's also not going to be dealing with the property day after day. That's going to fall to the responsible one who might not have as much money, and she's going to end up paying the bills and dealing with contractors and working on that property, having to deal with it constantly. She's not going to get paid for that because there's no cash flow coming out of the property because it's a piece of hot cash flow garbage. And the one who isn't good with money, or the one who's going through something in his life, going through a divorce, having to restart, he's going to want to sell that property and get the cash out of it. And what gets even better is if there's some sort of emotional component to this, all right? What if it's mama's house? What if it was the house where we all grew up, right? We grew up in this house. It was mama's house. We're not going to sell mama's house. And that can just create an inheritance bomb for families. I've seen it tear families apart over and over and over and over, and inheriting millions of dollars that no one can get to and that one person has to deal with every single day as a real asset. Nightmare. Would not wish that on my worst enemy. Bedrock specializes in what we call a 1031 one-to-many exchange. There are great houses out there, guys. I'm just going to be blunt. There are great houses out there. I've shown you some. I'll show you more. You can take a $2 million property. You can do a 1031 exchange. If you know what you're doing and you know how to identify and you know how to work with 1031 custodians, you can just go buy tomorrow. You can certainly identify them within the 45-day identification period. You can certainly close on them within 180 days, right? If you know what you're doing, you can tomorrow set out on the path and say, I'm going to sell this $2 million property that's only yielding me $4,000 a month gross. My net's like zero or negative, right? I can sell that tomorrow and I can go buy 8 houses. I can buy 3 of them in Florida. I can buy 3 of them in North Carolina. I can buy 3 of them in Jonesboro, Arkansas. You can just go buy those, 250 grand a pop. They'll rent for about 2 grand a pop. I can tomorrow take my cash flow from $4,000 a month gross to $16,000 a month gross. Even if you hire a property manager, which you didn't have before, you're still going to triple your income. Even if you hire a full-time business manager to keep your books straight and this and that and the other and deal with your property manager, you're still going to double or triple your income. It's just a matter of getting your property to actually cash flow positively. It all goes back to that 1%, the golden rule, right? It all goes back to that 1% rule. And there are houses in these markets that are $250,000 that rent for $2,000 a month. I've already seen people in the comments say, hey, in my market, it's about like that. That's true. There's really good assets in those markets. Problem number 2, long-term care. When we're talking long-term care risks, I love the Bedrock solution because if you did go buy 8 properties and you did need to go into long-term care, if you've never done long-term care shopping, usually those facilities require one huge payment to get in, $250,000, $300,000. I've seen them all over the board. The nice thing about having 8 properties that are cash flowing positive is you can always sell one of them. Guys, a $250,000 taxable event is not a $2 million taxable event. That won't even screw up your Medicare. That won't even screw up your Social Security too bad. All the other things in your life that kind of are income based won't just get nuked by selling one house for $250,000. Right? You could sell one house down the line if you need to do it. If inflation goes up and things get really expensive and you start having to kind of chip away at this nest egg little by little by little, you can sell properties in different calendar years and get better tax treatment because instead of one single year, $2 million tax windfall, you're selling a property in 2006, you sell one in 2008, you sell one in 2009, and the whole time you were making $16,000 a month instead of 4. A 1031 one-to-many exchange really works. It works even better when it comes to the inheritance bomb. You know what you do if you pass behind 8 properties, none of which were mama's house? You know what you do? You leave one kid 3 of them, you need to leave another kid 3 of them, and you need to leave the third kid 2 of them, and some cash. Right? Or something like that. It's so much easier to inherit properties where it's like, hey, you get the ones in North Carolina, you get the ones in Jonesboro. And then each kid can decide what they're going to do. Well, am I going to sell these properties at the stepped up basis? Cool. Am I going to hold on to these properties and have them feather my nest long term and be a great thing? I'll just work with Bedrock, let them keep doing their business. Cool. It just gives so many better options for your kids not to be fighting over one asset the entire time. Reminds me of James and the Giant Peach. You don't want one giant peach that your kids kill each other over. And then the no cash flow risk, we solve that immediately. Like people who've worked with us, they just are shocked how quickly we can fix the cash flow. Going from $4,000 a month gross to $16,000 a month, going from $800 a month net to nine, $10,000 a month net. It's a life-changing amount of money. I worked with way too many good people who spent their entire lives building portfolios, only to see them struggling really bad in retirement. And I know how much life you have to wait for to have savings. I know savings is just like enjoyment postponed. It hurts me to see people sitting on assets that just suck. You could sell a $2 million property earning $4,000 a month, and you could earn three times that in a CD at the bank. You can't do it because you'll get cap gains tax murdered, but you can do 1031 one-to-many exchanges. And the nice thing about that is you can stay in an asset class that you understand. You can stay in single family residential. You already know what that is. You can buy in markets that aren't complicated beyond the moon. We're not asking you to put your money into a syndication or a tenant in common or a DST or any of the large commingled funds. We're not saying, hey, give up your asset. You can control these 100%. You just hire someone to deal with the day to day, and we're about to talk about that. But you can stay in an asset class that you understand. You can maintain 100% ownership, 100% control. It's just a matter of looking into better markets and actually figuring out what works. Now, if you just want to go out and buy everything I buy, you don't even have to use us. I will give you our secret sauce for free, just as my gift to you for joining me. This is all I buy. Every single house I buy is between 1,200 and 2,400 square feet. It is 1980s or newer because of lead bans and deferred maintenance. It's either a three-bedroom, two bath, or a four bedroom, two bath. It has two car garages. We typically do not do on-street parking or carports. We're looking for entry, middle class neighborhoods. The highest possible number of renters, the highest possible number of buyers. We want that cross section, okay? Where you've got the most renters humanly possible and the most first-time home buyers humanly possible. Because when we sell on the other end of this transaction in 5 to 7 years, we want a home buyer to get it. We're not looking to permanently deplete housing stock. We are looking to use housing stock temporarily as a transition. Okay. Moreover, we are not looking for the only person who will buy our house when this is done to be a battle-hardened portfolio manager who owns 400 houses. We are looking to sell this house when we are done to a first-time home buyer. We get more demand, we get higher prices, we get better deals for everybody. Okay, so we want that perfect cross section, maximum renters, maximum buyers. The last time you rent, the first time you buy. We want that house. All right. We want to be earning returns at least 5.5% cash on cash. We only buy between $185,000 to $265,000. We want safe neighborhoods. All right. We want neighborhoods where people feel safe walking down the street with their kids, class A and B residential neighborhoods. That's our buy box. Now, everyone has some failures, and those are fun too. So let me just tell you some of mine. This has not been a crystal path paved with perfection. We have made mistakes just like anyone has made mistakes. I'll tell you first about selling a house to my own dang brother. All right, my older brother, Jeff, who's 8 years my senior, came to me one day after we'd been in this for 10 years. We'd already bought 1,000 houses, right? He came to me and he said, hey, I want Bedrock to buy me a house. And I said, okay, cool. Here's our buy box. Here's the only thing we buy. And he said, but what about this other house in the same market where you want to buy? He's like, I want to buy maybe this duplex. And I said, well, I don't like duplexes. They don't appreciate nearly as well. They're a lot more complicated. I don't enjoy duplexes. This is not our buy box, Jeff. And he's like, well, that's the one I want. And I was like, okay, we'll help you transact it. We'll get you a realtor. We'll help you transact it. But I can't guarantee this is going to work like every other Bedrock house has ever worked. And he's like, I know better than you because I'm your older brother. And that's how life is. And so we said, okay, man, I guess I'm never going to know more about you. And he's a great dude. And I love my brother Jeff. And if you're watching right now, sorry for, telling your own business. But he went and he bought this duplex. Not a Bedrock property, not in our buy box, but he bought this duplex and he ended up selling it about 3 years later for like break even, maybe break even a little less because it didn't appreciate and it didn't do very well. And he constantly had to keep doing things to it that are duplex specific. It was just a little bit of a nightmare. And so he sold out and he went and did something else fun with his time and his money. I had another client come to me earlier in the days of Bedrock, maybe right when we launched the business management product 6 years ago. They looked at our buy box and they said, I really want you to buy me something bigger than you're used to. I know the max you say is 2,200 square feet, but I want you to buy something that's like 25, 2,600 square feet, more of an executive home. Because if we ever decide to leave California, we might want to move into this rental. And so we found this house, Rock Hill, South Carolina, right beside Charlotte. It was bigger than we like. It was more expensive than we like. I would have liked to be investing north of that in Salisbury, South Carolina's property taxes on non-owner occupied are freaking murderous. But he wanted a bigger house and we obliged and we regretted it. He bought it for $295,000. We could not keep it rented. Turns out it's really hard to keep a house rented for $2,800 a month in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Who knew? Right? It's really easy to keep them rented for 18, 1900 bucks, but it was really hard to keep it rented for $2,800 a month. And so the rent just kept falling. We kept losing tenants and went from 2,800 to 2,600 to 2,200. Eventually I said, "Hey, I think we place it at 2,200. It's not as good cash flow as we hoped. I didn't want to buy this house to begin with. Just hold on to it. It's a good asset." He decided to sell it for 325. It's now worth $500,000 4 years later. Whatever. This one really bugs me. I had a client, still love him to this day, still work with him to this day. We said, hey, based on the amount of money you have, you can afford 11 properties. He was doing one of these $2 million 1031 exchanges, a little bit more. And he said, I can afford 11 properties, but I really want 12. Lucky number 12. And I was like, that's not how real estate works. You don't buy properties based on how many you feel lucky. And he was hell-bent. He was going to buy 12 properties or no properties. Problem is, we had to take all the price points down by about $30 to $40,000 to get another property wedged in. And we had to not buy in Orlando where we were planning on at that moment. Those properties went through the roof. We had to move his acquisitions to Indianapolis. And so we were buying cheaper houses in Indianapolis instead of more expensive new build houses in Orlando. And that portfolio, we have had to since sell every single house in Indianapolis because it turns out you don't want to buy a house sub 185 in Indianapolis. It is a huge hassle. All right. Our secret sauce is straightforward. We buy the same house over and over and over. Not even that special. We're pretty bright, but we're not even that bright. The truth is, we buy the same thing over and over and over. I've already explained we want 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 4 bedroom, 2 bath. We want the maximum number of first time home buyers and the maximum number of last time renters. We want that moment where you go from renting to buying. We have found over 5,000 properties that the buy box is where the good things happen. All right. Outside of the buy box is where the bad things happen. And every single time we have stepped out of our very specific box, we have gotten bloodied in a new, unusual, and expensive way. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. If you work with Bedrock, we're going to buy exactly this. We're not going to go outside of this whatsoever. We're going to buy the next Big Mac off the line. We'll try to be the McDonald's of investment real estate. We buy the same thing over and over and over, and it freaking works as long as you make a system and stick to it. Now, the nice thing now is in the markets where we do buy, when a realtor sees a house that's 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1980s or newer, when they see the right house, they just call us. They say, hey, Bedrock, I got this awesome house for you. We run our diligence. We know the markets really well. We're constantly buying and selling in those markets. And so it's easy to spot a good deal for us. When a rehabber is at a foreclosure auction and they're looking at something, they know what their budget's going to be, they just call us. Hey, Bedrock, we got this awesome deal. We can get it completely rehabbed to your specifications. We can give you these level of warranties on the property. Are you interested? Sure, we'll have that conversation. When a builder gets to the end of their build out and they have 10 or 12 houses left so they can move on to the next thing, they just call us. Hey, Bedrock, we'll cut you these smoking deals if you can move these 11, 15, 20 properties for us. So we have really good teams in all of these markets helping us do this thing. The nice thing for you, if you're considering working with Bedrock, is for every one property we actually email you, for every one property we actually get on a phone call with you and chat about, we're going to be looking at 30. We're going to have run our diligence, all the other stuff. I saw someone earlier talk about what about financing and what about cost and what about HOA. I'm going to go back into that in a minute and talk about that. But we do a first level of diligence, which is, hey, would we even consider it 160 or less? And then we do everything else. We pull all the comps. We pull the homeowner's insurance. We have our brokerages do their business. We do all of that. And then we show you the property. We look at 30 properties for every one you see, and you usually look at 5 or 10 properties before you make an offer, or before you make an offer that gets accepted. So we are looking at hundreds of properties in our very tiny buy box. And when you get that granular with your purchasing, it gets much easier to make good deals. It gets much easier not to have huge mistakes all the time. The nice thing for you is, yeah, we bought a house in Memphis yesterday. So we just sold a house, two houses in Memphis 2 days ago. All right, we're buying this house for you tomorrow. At Bedrock, we're constantly working in these markets, buying and selling in these markets. And so we're able to keep really well abreast of how the markets are going. Adding your next purchase to our pipeline is nothing, right? It's just one more house. Whether it's your first house or whether it's doing a 1031 exchange, we just did a $4 million 1031 exchange, 36 properties we bought in that. We were able to identify them all within 45 days. We were able to close on all of them within 180 days. That's something that a single person's just not going to be able to do. Here is some pictures of houses we have bought. Every single one of these is a house that we have closed in the last 20 years. You can see a common theme. They are all 1980s or newer-ish. Some are rehabs, but very seldom. They're all, two-car garages, three-bedroom, two-bath, four-bedroom, two-bath. They're all good-looking houses in Class A, Class B neighborhoods. That's all we buy these days. Our clients are freaking thrilled with this stuff. And you'll even see some of the pictures. That's Stephen Forrest. That's Albin. Those are in Memphis. That one's in Salisbury. You can just see this is all we buy. Now, that's the one I showed you earlier that was too big, the executive home, but we did buy it, so I put its picture there, and it's really pretty. We're going to wrap this up and we're going to talk a little about dealing with all of this stuff. But the truth is, it is a journey. We got to find the market. We got to find the house. We got to introduce you to the teams. We have all the teams in place to do this. Self-directed IRA lenders and custodians, and we can look at your assets. Everyone at the team has heavy backgrounds in financial advice because I stole a bunch of financial advisors when I left that firm to start this. We work with them still to this day. They still love us. With that being the case, every situation is different. Having an expert to guide you along the way makes all the difference in the world. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but Jeremy, buying 8 properties, three in Charlotte and three in Florida and two in Memphis sounds like a dang nightmare. It sounds like herding cats, right? And it can be. I'm not going to lie. That's the downside of what I do. If you're going to go get your cash flow to work, it can be administratively nightmarish. But what if I told you it could be easier than what you're currently doing, right? Buying 8 houses can be a full-time job. And I think one of the biggest lies ever told in real estate investing is just hire a property manager. They'll take care of everything. Okay? At best, a property manager takes care of about half. Usually, in our experience, and I have 13 property managers in 9 states. Usually, property managers take care of about a third, like 33%. They take tenant calls, they collect the rent, they schedule repairs. And then they provide a level of service that can either be great to horribly lackluster. What they don't do, what no property manager does, is keep your books for you or keep themselves honest or arrange financing or pay mortgages or make sure that when your mortgage is sold, you didn't just get mortgage frauded. Keep themselves honest, make sure work actually got done, follow up, make sure that when they overbill you or poorly bill you, it actually gets dealt with properly. There is a level of management with single family residential and with all real estate that I'm going to call business management, planning your capital expenditures, tracking your ROIs, looking at your valuations, when's the time to sell, keeping your books for taxes. All right, sending over your stuff, getting your HUD over to your accountant at the beginning of the year so he can calculate your depreciation. Property manager doesn't do any of that. Right? Anyone who says just hire a property manager in a market that you don't live in, bull freaking crap. All right? That is not the way this works. There's so much work that can go into really managing a piece of real estate because it's a business. All right? It's not passive, and anyone who ever says it's passive is lying to you and wants your money. Anyone on this call who has real estate knows it's not passive. Now, picking a good piece of property, that's 50%. Dealing with the property is the other 50%. And that's what we do here at Bedrock. We help you pick it and we help you deal with it. And we have a contract that our clients freaking love because, in all candor, if it does not perform as advertised, we're willing to do all the work and not get paid. Let me repeat that again. We will do all the work you see on the screen, keeping the property manager honest, setting up your LLC, keeping it compliant, setting up the bank accounts, getting them working right, making sure CapEx are reserved properly, keeping your books, getting ready to send your tax ready documents to your accountant at the beginning of the year, managing your 1099s, making sure your 1099s actually match with rent received, all that crap. Everything that goes into the business management of single family residential property. We are willing to do all of that. And if the property does not perform as advertised, our contract says we'll do it for free. We are deadly serious about picking good assets because at the end of the day, you just want a portfolio that works. I get what all of my clients want. They want a portfolio that works, and that boils down to three things. They want a market competitive earning rate. They would like to be seeing 37% cash on cash. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Single family residential is not a high risk, high return investment. It is a low to moderate risk, moderate to high investment. It's great because it manages to kind of decouple those two things. Usually you get low risk, low return. High risk, high return. The really great assets after a decade of financial advice are the ones that give you low risk with moderate return or low to medium risk with moderate to high return. That's single family residential. All right. Depending on the appreciation and your financing, you can have low to moderate risk, but moderate to high returns. That's magic. That's financial magic. So usually people want market competitive returns. We say a minimum it should be at 4% cash on cash. You should never have a piece of real estate in your portfolio that is at a flat or a negative. Number two, it needs to appreciate over time. I know earlier in the conversation I said appreciation is a young man's game, and appreciation is a young man's game, but it still needs to appreciate. For the math to really work and to get to that medium to high returns, you have to have decent appreciation. And number three, it cannot blow up your everyday life. It has to be somewhat passive. We know what people want. They want a decent return on their money, they want decent appreciation, and they don't want it to blow up their world, right? With that being the case, we know what people want. You want to enjoy your life. You want to go sit on a beach. You want to go travel a little bit. You want to play with your grandkids a little bit. You want to actually go see some of the world. And when your dang kids and grandkids ask for help going to college, you want to be in a position to say yes instead of in a position to be like, well, once we die, you'll have this $2 million from this asset that's going to step up in basis. Just terrible stuff, right? Unfortunately for me, I am not the only guy who offers to help people buy real estate. The term in the industry is turnkey. There's turnkey real estate that's available. There are a lot of turnkey houses out there. Some of the bigger ones are like Real Wealth Network or Rich Uncles, Chris Crone, Done For You Real Estate, Bedrock, right? We're all turnkey houses. My biggest problem with this style of real estate, what I got into, is that we all charge a fee to help you find a piece of property. Everyone else just drops you, lets you deal with it yourself. And that creates a nasty habit in the industry of passing off things that look good on paper, but are trash. And buying real estate in markets that you do not live in that is trash is just grenading your portfolio. I had this client. I'll wrap this up with a quick story. I had a client while I was still in financial advice who worked with one of these big houses. I'm not going to say which one, but he bought this house in 2014 in Detroit. He bought it for $53,000. I saw the pro forma, and the pro forma said, hey, it'll rent for $900 a month. And by the time I saw this, I was like, ooh, 2014 in Detroit. The three rules of real estate are location, location, location. This one fails all three, right? This is a horrible deal. Looks incredible on paper. Dude, 900 bucks a month? $53,000 cash, a 58 GRM, lower the better. That looks like you're going to get inducted directly into the Real Estate Hall of Fame, right? You get the hat and the trophy. I'm kidding. Neither of those exist. But like, it looks awesome on paper, but anyone who has a minute as a real estate operator is going to be like, don't do that. It's too cheap. There's a reason you don't buy sushi for 10 cents a pound. All right. There's such a thing as too cheap, even in real estate. All right. That house was impossible to keep rented. He had to do 4 evictions in 1 year. Insane. He averaged about $4,200 every time that he had to do an eviction. And then luckily for him, it burned to the ground and the insurance paid him $88,000. It was just a disaster from day one. I knew it was going to be a disaster from day one. He was buying in the wrong place, way too cheap. That's a horrible property. And it turned out to be a horrible property. Now, I try to look at the bright side of life, and some of the worst experiences of my life have taught me the most. I call them redemptive experiences. So I asked him, hey, what did you get out of this? Like, I know this was a trash experience and you were constantly traveling and it was kind of a grenade in your portfolio. He and I were really good friends by this point. And he was like, I actually did get something out of this that's interesting. He said, I had to constantly fly back and forth to Detroit. And as I flew back and forth to Detroit, my wife wasn't coming with me, but I had to go dejunk the house again, or I had to go hire another property manager. I had to go fire a property manager. I had to go to the eviction court and get the eviction proceeding. I was always there for 3 or 4 nights here and there. And he's like, I realized that I became a Pistons fan. What? He's like, yeah, I went to Detroit a bunch and I realized I was a Pistons fan. I loved basketball in high school and I kept going to these Pistons games and I realized I love NBA basketball and I'm a huge Pistons fan now. And I was like, okay, that's the goal. The goal in retirement is not to become a Pistons fan. All right, the goal in retirement is to have an asset that actually performs correctly so you can stay in Golden State and do what you're going to do, be in your hometown, sleep in your own bed. The goal is not to become a Pistons fan because you bought some grenade off a turnkey webinar. I'm going to be perfectly valid to you guys. Here is what we are seeing in the last 5 years in our portfolio. We are seeing that cash rentals, cash on cash, are typically averaging for our clients about 12 to 35% all in net returns. We are typically seeing over the last 5 years that all of our leveraged real estate is actually between 18 and 55% cash on cash. When it's all said and done, we're about to wrap this up. I'm going to show you guys some case studies of actual properties that we actually have right now. I went through my last 10 annual reviews that come across my desk all the time. Every single year, we do an annual review that looks like this for every single client. This is in Memphis, Tennessee. I think that property is called Naples. As you can see here, if we go into this, we keep the books. We set up the LLC. We keep it in compliance. We deal with the property manager. We deal with the day-to-day. We talk to him once or twice a week. We put it on a hot list when there's problems, and then we track it all, and we send it to you once a year, and we say, hey, is there anything you got a question about here? If you boil this down, this annual review down, what you'll see is we bought this property a couple years ago for $165,000 when this came across my desk, December 19th. It was worth about 226. We just put this under contract for 230K, so that number turned out to be pretty accurate. And you can see they got an 8% cash on cash plus principal pay down, not in this case because it was a cash property, plus appreciation, depreciation. What I love about real estate is it's a burger, right? You get all these different ways that you can earn money. You get your cash on cash, you can have principal pay down, you've got appreciation, you've got depreciation. And so this guy, this last year, saw about $26,000 of value added to his portfolio. 15%. That kicks the crap out of any annuity on the market. That kicks the crap out of the S&P 500. That's an incredible return on a cash asset. Originally purchased $165,000. We're just getting it sold right now. Actually, the client who owned this property passed away, and we're selling it for their kids. So, with that being the case, you can see another example. What we do for our clients is beyond that. What we realized early on is most people don't have the way to look at the numbers because they're not tracking enough of the numbers. We go for that same property and say, well, what if you had bought it with a mortgage? What if you had bought it leveraged? What if instead of putting down 165 grand, you would only put down 44 grand? What would the math look like differently? Let's look through the window and say, well, what if it was leveraged? Because there's maybe a moment in your future when we're looking at your properties and you got all this stuff leveraged and you say to yourself, I would rather, instead of having a 5% cash on cash and all this appreciation and a super high return, I would rather have more cash in my pocket. Instead of having $2,400 of net operating income, cash flow coming to me a year, I would rather have $14,000 coming to me a year. So I'm going to sell some of these properties and I'm going to consolidate into a paid off position. Or I'm going to do the exact opposite. I bought this property because I didn't know Bedrock that well. I bought one property I wanted to try you guys out. And as you've been awesome for years, I realized I would have been a lot richer had I bought these properties leveraged. So let's go snag some lines of credit. Let's go do some refinances. Let's go dump in other assets that we've got and let's buy some leveraged properties. We're showing our clients every single option every single year. Most people can't even get to a point where they have a really good looking annual report because half of this stuff comes from the property manager. It never gets entered into QuickBooks or Quicken or anything like that. Half the property management statements don't even API. You can't even get them to automatically integrate. Half of our property managers, we can't get to integrate. So I have a full-time bookkeeper entering data so we can create stuff like this. I had someone the other day ask me, can you just give me the report? Can you just, how much do I have to pay you for just the reporting? And I said, we can't do it. The only reason we can do the reporting is because we've set up the bank account for you, we've set up the LLC for you, we've kept it in compliance. We are running this like a business. And because we're running it like a business, all the data ends up in the right place and we can just crank out a report. It takes 10 seconds, right? But unless you're running it like a business from the beginning, it's impossible to get to this type of reporting on single family residential unless it's going to be a full-time dang job. Here's another house, 12% cash on cash. Our client invested 215,000, all in it was 224. They've held that property for 6 years. We're seeing really good cash on cash returns. Another house, 120,000. We bought this on the low end, but they still got a 16% cash on cash ROI, 8.33% cash on cash. An awesome deal. 16%. Another house, 12%. Another house, 15%. If you're looking for where I'm calling these percentages, is right over here, right? 12%, 15%. We have seen some smoking deals in the portfolio. I'm just looking to buy a whole bunch more. All right. We've helped people buy over 5,000 of these. We're happy to buy people 5,000 more. Our services are pretty straightforward. The bottom line is, if you want to manage it yourself, you can just buy a property knowing we picked it really, really well. You buy the property, you can do the business management. Okay, if you know how to do that, we have some clients who are like CPAs or CFOs. They just buy property with us because they know we vet very, very hard. Or you can hire us to do all the stuff that I've talked about. We do that for hundreds of properties every single month. Your property is just going to be another one on the pile. Here's the promise, and here's what I do that no one else does. We offer a contract that no one else offers in the industry, not even close. We say, if you don't get to a 4% cash on cash return, we'll do all that work that I've talked about. LLC setup, compliance, accounting, administrative, property management setup, oversight, HOA compliance, all that crap, mortgage verification, all that crap. We'll do it all. If we can't get you to a 4% cash on cash, we'll do it for free. The reason for that is because when I was in financial advice, I stinking loved the firms that said, if we don't get you a positive return for a year, we'll do the work for free because they're putting their money where their mouth was. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Jeremy, that sounds like a great way to go out of business because you have one bad year, whatever, you just don't earn any money. Yeah and no. We're taking risk with you. If we're going to take this contract, you can have three things. You can hire us and pay our fee. Happy to do it. You can hire us and we'll take a contingent fee. We'll take a little more risk or a lot of risk right alongside you. If we take a lot of risk right alongside you, the way we get paid eventually is we share a little bit of the appreciation. You still own the thing outright. We just take a little bit of the appreciation if and when the property sells. Now, what's great about that? I mean, super great. If the property does not appreciate because you bought you a piece of trash for $53,000 in the middle of the burnt out Detroit monstrosity, and it never hits 4% cash on cash, we are signing up to do all the work for free forever. All right? We are deadly serious about the services we provide, and we are deadly serious about picking good assets. We offer this contract. A lot of our clients choose a contract that's slightly less expensive on the upside than this one, but I'll walk you through that on our phone call. We'll have a conversation. We'll pick what's good for you. You may not even need our services as far as business management goes. You may have properties that are sitting somewhere and you just want us to take over so you can go on vacation. We're happy to do that too. We'll discuss those fees. Every property is different. Every plan is different. My apologies. It's just we have to have a conversation to get into some of that. Here's the bottom line. We help you buy. We do the day-to-day management. We say if it doesn't get to a 4% minimum net operating income cash on cash, we will be willing to waive our fee. The way we do that is we get a little bit of the upside if it appreciates. If we buy you a piece of crap that does not appreciate and that does not hit 4%, we are willing to do all the work for the 5 to 7 years that you hold the property for free. You will not find anyone in the industry who's willing to put that much of their risk on the line because in all candor, most of them just want to collect a fee, sell you some piece of garbage somewhere, hope that real estate's good enough to save their bacon, and just go on to the next client. We like having long-term relationships. Can we guarantee success? No. We can't, guys. Real estate's real estate. Don't risk what you can't afford to lose. We've never lost a piece of real estate. We've never lost a piece of real estate in foreclosure, but we have had tenants do damage. It is still single family residential. Nothing I do is going to make single family residential not single family residential. But our clients are super happy. They're seeing great returns. And I can guarantee that if you feel pain and don't see a 4% cash on cash return, I'll do the work for free. My team will do the work for free. I'll pay them out of my own dang pocket. And if the asset does not go up in value, we'll never get paid for it. So we're never going to sell you something that we do not believe is going to have a good market return and going to go up in value over time. That's exactly what you want. All right. You want good market return. You want it to go up in value over time, and you don't want it to blow up your life. I have solved that. We've done it. 5,000 purchases. We're managing hundreds of properties a month. If this interests you, we're looking forward to having a conversation. What I would do is just sign up, fill out the survey. We'll have people calling out, trying to get a hold of everyone. Thank you guys so much. Take that 2 minutes, fill out the survey. Now we're going to go back through the chat, and I will stay as long as you guys want and chat questions and answers, and I'll answer as many good questions as I can. All right, so Rodney, purchase price or current value, same calc if no loans. Okay, so I would do current value just so we don't get into the situation of having all these properties that we're looking at for their purchase price. I think we addressed that actually later in the webinar where we said one of the main problems is people looking at their purchase price divided by their rent and they're looking at these non-current market value. That is a huge mistake. I cannot even state how big a mistake that is. And I've seen that done over and over and over. Yeah, you can hold on to some real trash for a real long time if you're like, I bought it for $80,000 back in 1973. You can hold on to it for way too long. You've got to look at your current value when you're doing ROI calcs. Because if you just sold the property, did a 1031 exchange, even if you didn't work with Bedrock, even if you just went and bought like oil contracts, right? You're going to get the current value in a 1031 exchange. So that's what you've got to look at. I would never recommend someone sell their rental real estate and take a tax murdering, but I would absolutely say you want to use your current values when you're doing your GRM calcs or your 1% rule calcs. You want your current value so that you have an idea of what your opportunity cost is. All right, John Cook. The best investment I've ever made was finding the best local property manager in all my markets. Good PMs are arguably the most valuable connections I've ever made. John Cook, love you. Great comment. My one caveat to that would be we've had some excellent property managers go to garbage over time. The worst property manager experience we've ever had is with a company called Mind. They did property management for us in Florida and Charlotte, and then we used them in Indianapolis. And then they started cutting budgets and laying people off. And they laid off 150 people. Our VP of operations, who we worked with directly, got garbage all of a sudden. He got super overwhelmed. Then he quit, and then they kind of fired everyone we worked with. And it turned into an 18-month fiasco that included them taking over a property from another property manager before we realized it was turning into a total garbage. It included them taking over property and not turning on the heat. And so it busted a central piece of plumbing and a central wall during the polar vortex of 2019. It caused $60,000 worth of damage that they then like declined that they had anything to do with. What I'm getting at is we have excellent property managers, but we tell everyone we work with a property manager is great as long as they're watched like a rat in a cage. And the reason for that is property managers can be good, but they change. Like our best property manager in our Memphis market, who I really, really like, he tore a bicep recently and stopped returning phone calls. And then his father passed away and really stopped returning phone calls. One of our property managers out of Florida was great for years. And then Mary left the company, who was some person that we just thought answered the phone. We talked to Mary a lot. And then their service went to garbage. And it turns out they didn't have systems. They just had Mary, who was incredible. And so we recommend property management, but you've got to be watching your property management. We had one out of Florida who just went hot trash all at once. We had one in Indianapolis went hot trash all at once. And so we agree with you. Property managers are the key, but making sure they're doing the work. Like even our best property managers will submit a bill with an error 1 out of 5 times because they're not accountants and they don't have accountants on staff and they're not really watching the numbers like you would watch the numbers as an owner. And so I appreciate that comment. My only caveat is when you do the number of properties that we do, You've got to watch your property managers. How do you get a part of the equity in a contract? If someone else wants to know how we do our contracts, we actually do a deed of trust. We just say, hey, we're going to have some value in the future. And you say, hey, this value in the future is going to be established at that point. And we just file a deed of trust. If you ever need to put a mortgage on it, we'll pull it off, we'll put it back. But it just makes sure in death, bankruptcy, breach of contract that we do eventually get paid, that we're not an unsecured creditor, and that we can do a lot of our work in a risk position without having to take ownership. So in these LLCs, you're a 100% member. In the bank accounts, you're a 100% member. We're managers of the LLCs, and we just have a deed of trust on the property securing that we eventually get paid. Now, if it doesn't go up, we don't get paid. Woohoo! That's a great question. What do you do for states where you have to be a licensed realtor to be a property manager, or it takes 3 years to be a broker to run your own business? In those states, we hire property management. We don't act as property manager in any market. We have found that local property managers do good work if you can find a good one. They know their market better than us. They live in their market. They understand changes in their market. They understand how to do it. They have local contacts in their market. That's where mine messed up. They tried to go to every market all at once and run it from one centralized location, and that just doesn't work. I do recommend local property managers. We have property managers in every market where we work, so we don't have to become property managers. We've considered if Bedrock gets big enough, maybe doing that. It's just not our top priority right now. There are some benefits to it. Maybe if Bedrock keeps growing at its current clip, we'll readdress all that. But yeah, we're not the property managers. We hire property managers. We're not the realtors. We hire the realtors. We just make sure you have the right team to get the transactions done. All right, it looks like that is all the questions. Hey, thank you guys so much.